A common justification that I hear from Christians in defense of slavery is that slavery, as we see it in the Bible, Christians will say something such as slavery was part of the culture at that time. They acknowledge that slavery is immoral. They would never endorse slavery in our modern society. However, they also contend that their God of the Bible does not actually condone these actions. He merely permitted it since it was part of their world. I find this argument to be completely baseless for more than one reason. Regardless of the fact that slavery was a part of the Hebrew culture, why would God not speak out against it? An omniscient, omnipotent, loving God would surely condemn such a hideous crime as slavery. What the writers penned on God's behalf is actually a silent acknowledgement and subtle endorsement of people owning other people. This can be seen throughout the Old Testament, and even in the latter Testament as well. For brevity, I'm not going to quote specific scriptures, but just the references. Slavery is mentioned in these verses, and it's not condemned. It is covered just in passing, as if they're talking about the score of a baseball game. Exodus 21, verses 20 and 21, Exodus 22:3, Leviticus 25:39, and Leviticus 25:44 and 40 through 46. Also, another defense I hear is that slavery is only covered in the Old Testament. That Old Testament was for the Hebrews, the Old Testament is for the Jews, and the New Testament is for the Gentiles. So that's the law for our modern world today, and that's the law that actually applies to non-Jews, essentially. But that's a ridiculous argument as well, because the New Testament addresses slavery in many different places. Ephesians 6:5, Colossians 3:22, 1 Timothy 6:1, Titus 2 verses 9 and 10, and 1 Peter 2:18 all address slavery. These verses emphasize that slaves should be obedient and respectful to their masters, just as they would be obedient and respectful to God. The inclusion of these verses in the Old Testament defeats any attempt from believers to state that slavery was only a part of Old Testament law and does not apply today. It clearly does. It's included in the New Testament, and that's only applicable if you still dismiss the Old Testament laws as not being valid. If the New Testament truly is designated for the Gentiles, then these verses only serve to support a continuation of the ownership of people and the degradation of humans as chattel. Tracing back to my original comment on slavery just being a part of the culture, then why do Christians condemn Muslims as barbarians living in the Dark Ages for the active abuse and murder of women, which is sanctioned by Islam? If actions such as these are merely part of the culture, then why is there an outcry of the actions of the religious peoples of the Middle East? After all, the attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001 are just part of the culture as well. Those attacks were perpetrated by religious men following the teachings and the commands of their holy book, the Quran. It is time for us to understand that immoral actions guided by the sanction of holy books and religion have no place in our modern world. The defense of these books as sources of morality and ethics is completely laughable. Although we do not have to deal with frequent suicide bombings and slayings of women in the United States, we are dealing with the antiquated ideas found in the Bible, such as anti-egalitarianism, racism, bigotry, and misogyny, just to name a few. These are immoral ideas that must be stuffed out. These mentalities have no seat in the auditorium of the future. We must accept the harmless differences of others without allowing these more sinister beliefs to overrun us. American politicians who speak out against the equal rights of homosexuals and the removal of abortion rights are no different than the leaders of the Taliban defending the shooting of a 14-year-old girl. We must speak out with a clear voice against the immorality which seeks to erode the foundations of our society. We know that our world is not eternal, but it may be much shorter-lived if we do not eliminate the possibility of destruction at the hands of religious radicals. Please promote the spread of knowledge wherever you go. Give books as gifts. Encourage free thought and constant questioning of our world. The choice is ours to preserve the beauty of this world for our children and their children after them. The survival of our species is in our hands.